let them know.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Newmarket Plan New Hampshire Design Charrette recommendations. So my name is Bob McDonough. I'm the Planning Community Development Director here at Newmarket. I just make this real quick because we got a lot to go through, but what we're going to do here is review the recommendations that the team has come up based on your feedback. And these are, a way to think about this more concept. So as we're going through this, we'll leave with these recommendations something to work off of. So it's nothing set in stone or anything. It's just ideas that was generated through community input and, something to leave us with to make it our own. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same wavelength, and I just want to say shout out to the team. Thank you so much for helping us out. Round of applause for them. And you can boo them later if you don't like it. So, without further ado, I'll hand it over to you. Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I think a lot of you, I recognize your faces from yesterday. There might be some new folks. We're so happy to have you all here for our presentation of what we've been doing over the past 2 days. This will be recorded, and the slides will be available to the town, so all of this will be available right away. So, yes, please, we're going to do Q&A at the end, so please hold your comments. This is what we're going to go over. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief because we have a big team and a lot of really cool recommendations, and I don't want to take up too much airtime. But really quickly, Plan New Hampshire, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We work across the state. And we really work to support excellence in planning, design, and development of New Hampshire's built environment. And one of our signature programs is the Community Design Charrette program, which is what we're here today representing. This program, we've been running this program since 1996. That's a map of all the communities we have worked in. So this is our 80th charrette, which feels very like it's a milestone for us. And we worked in 68 communities. So some communities have had so much success the first go around, they've had us come back 2 or 3 times to kind of expand their scope, look at another area, things like that. So it's pretty exciting. All the reports are on our website for anyone who wants to get real nerdy and dive down into what other communities have looked at and what kind of recommendations we've made. And really what it is, a charrette, it's just a gathering of lots of different people, wide spectrum of stakeholders, residents, community members, people who care about a certain area, looking at some of the challenges that exist and some of the hopes and desires for the future, and really coming together to look at what can we do to move forward, what kind of recommendations can be made that might be something Newmarket would be interested in. So our team does a lot of listening. That's what we do a lot yesterday, listening, seeing, and then brainstorming about what do we know from our professional backgrounds and from what we heard and learned in Newmarket that we can bring to the table to give to your community. And also, it is an application-based process, so we never go anywhere we're not invited. So Newmarket presented an application and invited us in to do this, and so thank you to the town. And this is what our 2 days look like. A lot of you were here yesterday, so you already know this, but we toured the area. We had a stakeholder meeting, we had 2 community input sessions, and then all day today our team was working to create the recommendations you're going to see in a few moments. And now we're reporting out. And the only other piece that will come about 8 to 10 weeks down the road is we'll just formalize everything you hear tonight into a more finished document, because everything you see tonight happened in the last 8 hours. But we'll not even 8 hours, I don't know how many hours we've been here. So there will be a more polished document that we will give to the town, and then your town, your committees, everyone will have that moving forward for anything that you are looking to maybe try and take action on. Sorry, there's a little delay in my clicker. But our volunteers who are all around the room. If you guys want to just like raise your hands, you'll hear a lot of them tonight. They're going to talk about their recommendations. And it's really a mix of folks, multidisciplinary. So engineers, architects, planners, folks with coastal resiliency expertise, a lot of different expertise that we helped bring this team together for the purposes of this charrette in particular, which was regarding your riverfront. And everyone that's a part of these teams, they're volunteering their time, their firms, their organizations support them in being here on the Friday and the Saturday. And a lot of them have been a part of many charrettes, and they really love being a part of these processes and see it as a way that they give back to their community and kind of get back to the roots of their discipline. So we really enjoy being a part of it. And that's our team here that we took a picture in front of your awesome new mural yesterday. And then who our team actually is, I know you're not going to read this whole slide, but we might have to move it. Okay, there we go. That's our team that's here today, but this will be provided to you guys. And when people do come up from our team to talk about their recommendations, I'm just going to ask at that time that they introduce themselves so you know who they are. And I am actually going to hand it off to our team lead, one of our team leads, Brian Pratt, from Preston O'Neill, and he is going to talk about the actual particular Newmarket charrette. So, thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you all for coming. Brian Pratt. I'm a civil engineer with Preston O'Neill in Manchester, and I'm also on the board of directors of Plain New Hampshire and on the charrette committee. So I helped with Tiffany and Bart and everyone kind of like gather all these volunteers to help. Let's see. Mike, I think I'm getting a delay. I don't know if you can flip it for me. So why did we come here? So we received an application, as Tiffany mentioned, from Newmarket to really study the interrelationship between people and the urban riverfront area located in downtown Newmarket. So we had an initial meeting back in December, and in the past few months we've been kind of coordinating with the town, building some base map graphics, and working together to build the team. Where is the project area? So this is it, highlighted in yellow. This is what we kind of classified as the waterfront downtown urban area. We expanded it a little bit, but and we did a walking tour. So in red is the walking tour that we did. So we started here at Town Hall. We walked down Main Street, came down Water Street. We walked up the riverfront through Rivermore Landing's property, up through Chinberg's property, up to Bryant Rock, over by the dam, back down Main Street, and back down to Town Hall. We saw a ton of information. You guys have an awesome downtown, you have an awesome riverfront, a lot of great questions, a lot of good information that we gathered during that walk. So these are some photos from the team site walk. Like I said, we started at Town Hall. It's absolutely beautiful, and peak foliage was a nice little touch there. And nice weather too. Mike, can you hit it? All right, so after we got back from the site walk, we started some more meetings with some of the stakeholders. So I'm going to have Sarah talk about that.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sarah Reitzman. I work for New Hampshire Housing. I do sort of technical assistance, community engagement work. I also happen to be a Newmarket resident. I've done a lot of charrettes, but I've never done one in my own town, and that was a total joy, and I learned a lot. So yesterday, community engagement is a big part of the charrette process. Yesterday, we did 3 listening sessions. We met first with some stakeholders we invited, so that's often, it's town staff is part of that. People we like to have, somebody from the police department, somebody from the fire department, typically like folks from Arts and Tourism Commission were there, folks from the planning board, elected leaders, maybe local business owners. And we had 2 listening sessions after that were open to the public. So one in the afternoon at 3:30 and then one again at 6:30. And we heard a lot. Some of it conflicting, mostly great stuff, and some challenges too. So that's okay. All right, Mike, you do it. Just gonna put that down. We asked you what you see when you think about the riverfront area, our sort of scope. What do you see? You see opportunities for recreation. It's accessible. There's great wildlife. It's a close-knit community. It's vibrant and charming and walkable. There's concerts and other fun things like that. There's nature. We talked a bit about dogs. There was a little bit of vandalism. We talked about the weir, of course, and we talked about sewage too, because if you're in Shonda Park, you're probably going to see those trucks going through. We asked you what you wanted to see, and we heard parking. We talked about maintenance, lighting, bridges, docks, trails, access, wayfinding, playgrounds, maybe making some street a one-way. And then finally, we asked you, this last question was, what else do we need to know? So we talked about the land south of Shonda Park and the potential for trails and parks over in that direction. Talked about biking and pedestrian improvements to make it more walkable, more accessible. We talked about putting flashing lights at the crosswalks and ensuring that some of those crosswalks are safe, and some of our crosswalks already have flashing lights. We talked about mass transit, or the possibility of adding a train stop here, since the train, probably just heard it a couple minutes ago, the train goes right through town. We talked about preserving and not developing Heron Point, but maybe ensuring that people can access it more easily. And then we talked about consideration of creating a historic district. So we got a lot of information from you yesterday. And, oh, there's another one. We got a lot of information from you yesterday, so here's a little bit more. We talked about climate change. Anybody who lived here in 2006, 2007 knows the flooding concerns and flood insurance. Talked about a living shoreline, making sure we're protecting that riverfront, cleaning out invasive species, making it more aesthetic so that more people can access and enjoy the views on the riverfront. We talked about the weir, of course, and we talked about business turnover in the downtown. So we got a lot of information from you, and the Charrette team today has spent the day taking all of this information, figuring out how to synthesize it into recommendations to sort of satisfy the most people. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh now.
All right, thanks everyone. Yeah, I'm Josh Lacasse. I'm an architect by trade. First time doing one of these charrettes, but I do a fair amount of similar work in my day-to-day life. So I'm also a Newmarket resident, so I've been quite interested in contributing to the process here, so it's been fun. One of the first things we tried to do in our group is really look at the big picture, 30,000-foot view, try to understand really where the opportunities are. So a couple things we found in that process are that, you've got Main Street running through the center of town here in the yellow bar, 108 continuing south and north, and then the big opportunities or town-owned properties are sort of on the periphery. So you've got down here the wastewater treatment plant. Doesn't sound that appealing, but there is actually a fair amount of forested land down there and an extensive network of sort of informal trails. Along with that, sort of contiguous with that, is the fire and life safety complex. So that's a big piece of open space down along the river in town. And then, of course, across the river, we have a large piece of town-owned land in the Heron Point Conservancy. So those are really the significant areas of potential public engagement with the riverfront. Of course, downtown, there are a number of other smaller opportunities. Shonda Park, we know, is well used and well traveled. As you run through the downtown Main Street, we've got the bandstand, Arbor Park here, this former site of the city hall or town hall, which burned down, and then up toward the library and the bridge connection over to Bryant Rock area. So there are sort of isolated pockets of public space distributed through town. Another sort of takeaway from this is that the mill buildings, charming as they are, they're extremely long and sort of have the effect of separating Main Street from the river. So there are a few isolated points of access down to the river from Main Street, but we really wanted to take a look at, let me advance Oh, and here's just a few of those vignettes of the various public spaces. So the park area off of near Chinburg, running down to the bridge. Sort of the start of the Riverwalk area at Shanda Park. This is Arbor Park, the bridge, across the river at the Conservancy, and then Bryant Rock Park. So we looked at that existing network, kind of assessed the connections between these things. There are some existing connections. They mainly rely on streets and sidewalks, things like that. And then we went on to say, how do you improve those connections? So there's a few options we went through in advance. So there's a lot here, and a lot of these we'll get into further detail as we run through the presentation, but I'll just kind of generally walk through each one. We're calling these opportunities. They are things that may require conversations, may require special types of permitting, fundraising, things like that. There's all kinds of considerations that come along with each one of these, but we've identified eight different opportunities here. I'll just run through them. So the riverfront itself on the town side, finding ways of connecting Shanda Park with the properties up toward the waterfall. And so, how can we look for opportunities? We'll talk about this a little bit later, but looking for opportunities or strategies to make a cohesive riverfront. Opportunity number 2, sorry, these are in no particular order. Looking for alternative access routes into the Heron Point Reserve. So this could take the form of an easement or a negotiated agreement with some of the private landowners that surround that park. There is a network of existing sidewalks along Bay Road that might help enable this, as well as a parking area right there. So that could support such a thing. Opportunity number 3 is looking at that a little bit of a different way. So saying that we have a river separating town-owned land from Heron Point. So what does it mean to consider the possibility of a bridge spanning the Lamprey River? We've proposed a connection here at the narrowest point, and it's also the point where there's 2 pieces of town-owned land in opposition on opposite banks of the riverfront. We'll get into that a little bit later. Number 4, at the wastewater treatment plant, I mentioned there is, it's not just wastewater treatment, there's a fair amount of informal trail networks. How can we leverage that and make that connection for people to come from the town and access that network of trails, make better use of that property. Just looking for number 5. So another opportunity, we've got Shanda Park. We'll get into a little bit more specifics, but Shanda Park is generally separated from the wastewater town land by a private owner who has allowed an easement across their property for septic trucks. Is there an opportunity to increase that connectivity to allow other types of access across that private land? And this is something that would require, obviously, interface with a private landowner. Number 6, there is at the existing dam on the Lamprey, there is an empty parcel adjacent to, I think it's a book exchange building. It's used right now by the Fish and Game Department to access their fish ladder. Is there the possibility to develop that parcel into something that could be both used by the town as well as the Fish and Game and achieve both goals? Number 7, so this is an existing connection that exists, but there's the bridge up here at the northern part of the town, crossing the Lamprey River near the dam. There is a little bit of clarification necessary about the manner and purpose of the connectivity through the Bryant Rock Association. And so that was a recommendation that the town and Bryant Rock just work together to clarify the exact purpose of that, the rules around use of Bryant Rock Park, and how exactly that is intended to be used for public use. And then number 8, down at the near the fire and life safety, there is sort of a parcel surrounded by town land, but it's not owned by the town, it's owned by the state. And it has it's the Fish and Game dock, and I believe it has boat launch. And so how might we drive increased use of that boat launch? How might we leverage that boat launch for use by the public? So all of these we're going to get into a little bit more detail as we run through the presentation. The next slide, there's only one major difference on this slide. This is something that we were, and again, it's really just a concept. We wanted to test some ideas here. So this would require quite a bit of coordination with some of the private landowners in town. But if you notice that the point down here on the river where it gets very narrow, that is not necessarily the most connected point to downtown for a potential crossing of the Lamprey. So what if we were to devise a way to connect the downtown commercial core more directly across the river to the preserve, the Heron Point Preserve. So this might look like something like this. Again, there's negotiation would be required with Rivermore, of course, regulations surrounding state and federal agencies. But the benefit of such a scheme, so this connection across the river at this point, is that for someone standing on Main Street looking across, they're already at an elevated position above the river. There is the ability to gain some height over the water to come straight across with a bridge. This would be pushing the limits of a span for such a bridge, but there's a lot that would need to be figured out, but we just wanted to put this out there as something for consideration. Essentially, the goal of this idea is to ensure that someone who's having a coffee downtown or maybe doesn't know about the property down by the wastewater treatment, we're increasing access from the downtown to the Heron Point. And so we'll let you talk through a little bit more about the implications of these bridges.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Julie Whitmore. I'm from BHP. I'm a structural engineer, so I was here today to help evaluate some of our structural considerations for these crossings. So as Josh said, we're looking at concepts to evaluate and consider for in the future. And the concept that one of the concepts that we fettered out maybe a little bit further is the narrows crossing. So one of the benefits to this particular location, there's several benefits to this particular location, the narrowness of the Lamprey River naturally occurring through here, and then we have some elevation at both the Colonial Drive where it stops at the Classics roadway, and then again crossing over to Heron Point. So there's a nice natural point to provide this connection at an elevated position. We'd certainly need to have some coordination with U.S. Coast Guard, as this is navigable waterway, so we would need to step through that process to understand what we would need to provide for clearances. But certainly at these elevations, it gets us a little bit more space up here. So part of the concept here is not only providing a bridge connection, but as we start to tail away from Colonial Drive, so moving west toward Heron Point, the elevation starts to dip down. So really what we'd be looking at is constructing an elevated boardwalk and then leading into an approach span, a large span to get ourselves across the Lamprey River here, and then another approach span moving on into the connection to Heron Point. And here is just a concept of what this boardwalk could potentially look like. This is actually an existing structure up in Vermont, so pretty local. It has a boardwalk system with a bridge crossing. Just another option to consider. There are certainly a plethora of materials that you could select and choose from, but we wanted to provide some visual cues for folks to consider as part of this feasibility study, if you will. And here again is another concept. This is down in the crossing, Cape Cod Rail Trail, Bass River Crossing. We'd be looking at a truss span here. Prefabricated trusses are pretty common for rail trail, for pedestrian crossings. They can get pretty long as far as spans are concerned. We'd be wanting to accommodate such length in this area. The approach spans would probably be traditional steel girder bridges, but we'd be looking to do something along these lines. It sort of matches what we're already seeing in your downtown with the crossing up at Bryant Walk Park. So we wanted to kind of bring some of that element into this as well. So certainly not just a bridge, but thinking about the aesthetics and other considerations. So these are just concepts, but we wanted to bring them to the public so that you guys can think about this and whether or not Heron Point accessibility and connectivity is something that we want to pursue in the future. And I'm going to turn it over to Annie to talk to Shannon.
It's a lot of material to wait till the end with what you're presenting. So for a structure and a process, it just seems like it would be beneficial to ask as we go.
But they would never get through the material.
Well, I think it's for us.
Yeah,
It's for the owners. Yeah.
right, but we would never get to hear the whole.
It doesn't work not to have the questions answered either.
I think if there's like a brief clarification about the particular slide, we could probably take that at that time, but we do want to make sure we can get through everything.
How long
So,
is the
does that help?
presentation? How long is the presentation? And what did you
The
allow?
first one, they're usually 60 to 90 minutes, so.
So there's no time for Q&A?
Oh, yes, we do Q&A at the end, but you can ask the question now. What's your question, and then maybe we can.
So two things. I'm
Yeah.
president of Bryant Rock Association. It's the first time I've ever heard about this, and we have a lot of things in the works for the bridge and the fire lane already. So I'm kind of curious how we got here. But then also with the bridge, that brings a lot of boats, you know,
Right.
like fishing permits and all of that. Does this allow for any consideration of the existing development? Okay.
Yeah, so this is almost all the recommendations we will be presenting at this event, really are at that like visionary first stage, and then if the community is really excited about certain things and wants to move them forward, they would of course need a lot more intricate planning, fundraising and things, which we acknowledge, but this is more of the,
Yeah, totally get
so.
it. And it also, I can tell that the information that is needed to be communicated, you know, with working with everybody is going to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If anybody wants a notepad or anything like that, to take notes as we're moving forward, that way if you have questions, you'll hear it.
So I'm going to start, for the group of us who are all going to discuss on the park, so I'm just going to do the intro and then we'll get into the more proposed design concept as we move forward. My name is Amy Brock. I'm a water resource engineer with VHB. So I specialize in flood mitigation, flood protection, fuel rise, and water quality and review. So I'm just going to start with talking about the Alright, so first I'm just going to start talking about existing conditions where we are today, and then how that relates to climate and what we're currently seeing, what international projections expect to be seen in this specific area. So right now, our current mean high water, so you can think of that on average throughout the year, that's at elevation 3.4. So the international projections, this is what any projections that we go on to NOAA, this is where their data results come from. So there are a variety of different projection scenarios that line up with. So on the higher side, if things go really terribly, we could see that as soon as 2050. On the lower side, if we improve the conditions, if things aren't as bad as we think they might be, we might see that as far as 2090. And then another scenario that we could look at is 3.3 feet of sea level rise, and that would be an equivalent of the 6.7 elevation. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you an elevation view of contours. I don't know what happened. So this is where those elevations would line up on Shanda Park right now. So you can see the current day in the dark blue. That's lines up pretty well with where we're seeing high tide right now. And then the lighter blue would be out in the low scenario, I think it was at 2050, or current could be as far out as 2090. And then the green would be 6.7 feet of sea level rise. So now we're just going to hop through some inundation mapping just to give you guys some context of what these might look like. So 2 feet of sea level rise above mean higher high water. So I think actually the supermoon that we had just the other day was mean higher high water. So that would be that condition plus 2 feet of sea level rise. You can see it moving into Shanda Park. 2 feet, yep, go ahead. So next slide is 2 feet of sea level rise with a 1% storm. A 1% storm is the same as a 100-year storm. So when we say a 100-year storm, it has the same probability of occurring every year. So every year there's 1% chance of a 100-year storm happening. And that resets every year. Same with 500. That's a 0.2% chance of happening every single year. Next slide. So that's zoomed into Shanda Park. You see most of the park is underwater. That would be supermoon plus 2 feet of sea level rise. Next slide. So 2 feet of sea level rise with a 100-year storm. Next slide. So this is zoomed into condos, and you can see it's just starting to come up. Not too terrible over there. Next slide. But then with a storm event, it would be pretty damaging. Keep going. Okay, so this is, you guys are probably familiar with it. This is standing right at the edge of the condos looking towards Shanda Park, and this is a picture from this past winter. So next slide will show you what it looks like under today's normal no storm event. And one more slide. Oh wait, did I lose one? So I can just tell you that's standing right here, and then that lines up very well with the green line for sea level rise for 6.3 feet of sea level rise. So go back to the storm event photo. This is essentially that green contour on the sea level rise projections. So we're kind of already seeing it during certain storm events. That's what we would be expecting on those supermoon days. So 2 or 3 times a year, that can happen on a regular basis. All right, so now we're going to slide into ideas and concepts that we've had for what Shanda Park could look like if we were to redesign, remove the land bridge, and give you guys more of a public space to enjoy based on the feedback that we've got from what you're hoping for.
So my name is Jeff Highland. I'm a landscape architect with a company called Ironwood Design Group. I've been a practicing landscape architect for almost 30 years now, which seems kind of amazing, but it's true. So I was charged with looking at Shanda Park and also the area in front or between the river and Rivermore Landings. I'm going to start with Shanda Park. So you just heard about sea level rise. And one of the things that parks are great at is soaking up stormwater, soaking up inundations and things like that. They actually can act as a sponge. So that's one of the benefits of parks like this, And there are also some changes into the park design that can actually further enhance that soaking up effect that the park can have. So one of the things we've done is Moonlight Brook. We know that that has been a problem in the past with stormwater flow, and they're actually backing up of stormwater due to the culvert or the undersized culvert or land bridge. So this concept removes that, and in exchange creates a basically a bridge platform space that also doubles as a plaza space. So it's kind of gathering space, and it's also that bridge space at the same time. It's also elevated so that it is less prone to flooding. We've incorporated many of the elements that exist out there and just kind of reconfigured them. So some of the memorial elements out there, the flagpole, those are kind of located over here. We have the boat ramp, which remains. That has been shrunken down a little bit. So today, that boat ramp is about 35 feet wide, which is really excessive. If you look at Chapman Landing is about 16 feet. So we've reduced the size of this, creating that space that can absorb stormwater and floodwater. We've also incorporated some porous pavers. You already have some down near the boat ramp. We've increased those a bit. You can see there's significantly more planting down there to act as that sponge. We also have a green infrastructure area, basically right here. That's a small rain garden that has a forebay to collect sediment and things like that. And then it basically conveys stormwater through a series of small terraces that help clean the stormwater and slow the stormwater as it flows into Moonlight Brook. Moonlight Brook, as I mentioned earlier, the culvert is removed, which allows that to kind of freely flow back and forth. The tide water can back up into Moonlight Brook, and it becomes a much more natural system that occurs again. We've also increased the width of Moonlight Brook, so it does have a little bit more holding capacity and a more natural kind of edge condition. So it just looks more natural. Other things like the kayak storage area, that has pretty much remained the same down towards the bottom. There's a nice little lawn area. We heard yesterday that the paddle sports dock is a little undersized, so we've shown that increased a bit in size with the addition of an ADA boat launch and transfer station on that, so that people with mobility challenges can utilize that dock. We've created a spot for the weir to be pulled out of the river and stored kind of in that lawn area. That's kind of what's happening currently. And then up on the platform itself, we have some shade sails to offer some shade to just make it a kind of a more comfortable space. And then there are also some integrated benches and planters up on that platform as well.
Question?
Yes.
It's hard to understand what you're proposing here. Are you proposing to elevate portions of Shannon Park?
Yeah, primarily that plaza area.
Plaza, okay.
So it would be the kind of the gathering space within Shandon. Okay. So we have to kind of, ultimately, your next question is probably going to be like, well, how do you get to Shandon if everything else around it is lower and this platform is higher? I mean, that is a challenge for every municipality, is where you kind of draw the line. The roadway system, would that need to be adjusted? Potentially. But the platform itself, things that we're proposing today, do accommodate a sea level rise. And in accommodating that, we're also making sure that no damage occurs to the investment that is made. The last thing I'll mention is at the very top, we are offering a swing bench as a new amenity out there. It was mentioned, somebody mentioned it yesterday, and that seemed like it would be a nice place to offer that amenity. All right. And then here's just a small graphic of the platform, a 3D graphic.
Oh, okay, thank you. Hi, I'm Lisa Burt McCoy. I manage the Creative Community Development Program for the New Hampshire State Council on the Arts. And in terms of envisioning public spaces, sometimes it helps to provide some kind of visual or artistic context in order to really define and delineate the space. And so, especially because we have such a close proximity of public and private spaces coming together, one of the thoughts was, how do we use sculptural elements in order to define the entrance to Shanda Park, and in a smaller way that can be used to define or delineate or define public walkways versus private areas. So these are just a few examples. Both are from Portsmouth. I tried to dig up some other photos from other towns and couldn't find them. But the top is from the new Bahanko Gateway Park. This was part of their 14th anniversary installation. And then the bottom is the entrance to Chestnut Street. And it's just a demonstration of different kinds of artwork that can really kind of uplift or build on the character that's already inherent to the space and give it a distinctive character and a way of identifying you've arrived, more or less. Do you want to advance? So another thing that we were thinking about coming up was, I think it was your recreation director who mentioned the need to provide more activities for children. And so one of the things that we were thinking about is interactive sculptural elements. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Alnoba, which is actually a private property down in Kensington, but they have a lovely wooded area that's full of public art. They schedule tours where you can go and visit. But all of that art is designed to be interactive and engaging so that people can touch it, people can climb on it. We have this idea that art is something that we shouldn't be touching and we should be observing from afar. But I think the best art, and especially when it's in the middle of the community, is the art that invites us to interact with it. And so there is artwork that's specifically designed to be safely climbable by children. So the one on the left is using a sculptural cement product. The one on the right is wood and may not be ideal for your particular setting, but just to kind of give you an idea of the variety of different ways you can approach sculpture, and it can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. Another thought, I think, for Shanda Park, and this will come up again later in the presentation as well, is that it's a great opportunity to offer some STEAM education programming. When we're talking, you've heard about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. We throw in the A, and we're adding art in there, which is another great way for experiencing the world around us, processing the information that we're taking in, demonstrating creativity. And so I think having programming, either encouraging the schools to come up, doing something interactive through the library, where you're encouraging people to learn about the environment, the community, whether it's environmental sustainability and resilience, or whether it's the history and the heritage of the town, but really just offering the space and the places that are available in Newmarket as a learning opportunity for children. And then the other thought we had at Shanda Park was maximizing the public dock space. Right now it's pretty small. So we're looking at ways of expanding that public dock space, making it a little bit more versatile too, to be able to accommodate not only power boats, but also kayaks, self-propelled vehicles, and sorry, there's another slide on this, so advance a slide. And so this is an example from the city of Dover, just to show you how it accommodates a variety of different water vehicles and provides extra space for people to come and go.
Hey there, I'm Lynn Vaccaro. I'm a natural resource and community engagement person. I work for the Great Bay National Estuarine Research Preserve, which is based at the Discovery Center in Greenland. So I just was going to kind of add a little bit more to these design concepts that we're suggesting for Shanda Park. And this is a concept that's probably familiar to some people and maybe not so much to other people. This idea of, thinking carefully about kind of that edge between the land and the water, and really trying to, whenever we can, try to use natural, nature-based living techniques to try to stabilize the shoreline there. We know that's obviously a place where we're going to see increasing erosion, increasing wave pressure, with storms and with sea level rise, and how can we really leverage the power of nature there to kind of stabilize the shoreline and still keep all the like ecological services that are provided by a natural shoreline. And there's actually like a whole suite of different techniques that can be used. What's shown here is a technique you can use even on really steep banks. This is Flex MSE bags that Jeff actually kind of exposed me to, where it's kind of a geosynthetic kind of fabric that's wrapped around soil, and then you can actually plant in those bags so that it can become a vegetative place, but it has the stability that you expect and you need, especially for your shoreline right next to a downtown or to a park. Next slide. And so here's just kind of another image, when you've got a little bit more space and a slightly more gentle slope, you can really try to recreate the magic of a salt marsh along the edge of your shoreline. And so there might be a few spaces on the edge of Shanda Park where you might be able to achieve this and really use some of our salt marsh species, some of our grasses to really stabilize the shoreline there. And just a couple other species too. And this, you can really kind of continue this concept up into those kind of upper edges of your shoreline, especially looking at some of those imageries that Anik shared where, there's going to be increasing flooding for some of those edge spaces. Let's plant things there that can handle that. They can handle a little bit of salt, handle a little bit of flooding, and fortunately there's some beautiful plants that can, are really suitable there. So here's just a couple examples, and that'll be part of the final report. I think that's all I was going to share. And who am I passing to? Back to you.
Back to me.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Rivermore Landing in particular. There was a lot of discussion yesterday about the relationship of public and private space behind Rivermore Landing, and how best to share that. So today, you're probably all aware that pedestrians and even an occasional vehicle, for people who don't live at Rivermore Landing, pass through this area. So I've come up with 3 different potential concepts for this area. This is option A, and these are, again, very conceptual. They really are meant to kind of start a discussion. So today you have about 20 feet of roadway plus parking on one side. And that parking, this particular location has perpendicular parking, but there's a section to the south that has parallel parking. But for argument's sake or for demonstration, this is the perpendicular section with a 20-foot roadway section. Concept or option A, what it does is it leaves the existing parking as is, turns the road to a one-way going south, and then creates a delineated pedestrian route that's 5 feet, and that could be a variety of things. It could be a painted asphalt, it could be a paver. Potentially or ideally, I think that paver could be a porous paver. So it also helps deal with some of the stormwater challenges that exist down in that area. It would allow the stormwater to infiltrate. You'll see also that there's a 3-foot kind of planting strip between the 5-foot walkway and the small private patio spaces. And that little section there creates a little bit of a buffer between that pedestrian walkway, that 5-foot walkway, and those private patio spaces. So it really starts to delineate what is acceptably used by the public and what truly is Rivermore resident private property. You could even go as far as putting small gates to access each one of those little patio spaces. And again, these are very conceptual. This option right here, option B, eliminates that 3-foot planting strip. Obviously keeps the private patios, has the 5-foot delineated walkway, goes to 2-way traffic. So basically that pavement, that delineated walkway, is drivable. So it becomes this kind of shared space between pedestrians and vehicles, which is really what you have today. It's just it's not defined through a pavement use. So this is really very similar to what you have today. It's just cleaned up and delineated to a greater extent. Next one. And then this is the third option, and this is kind of the grand, I guess, option, thinking, big picture. This keeps the 20-foot two-directional vehicular travel, 18-foot parking spaces. You maintain the small patios, the private patios, and it puts actually a boardwalk element on the outside. So it's a cantilevered boardwalk supported on piles out onto that rock slope, that riprap slope that exists. The back of that boardwalk would be basically at mean high water, and then it would extend out. So you'd be slightly above what the current patio is, but pretty similar elevation-wise. This obviously would have railing. Yeah, and here's some examples. This is down in Exeter. It's their waterfront river walk. It's a pretty narrow one. Here's another example. I'm not sure where that one is, but it's a nice one. Yeah, is that Portsmouth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Who's next? All right.
Go ahead. Just in case.
Okay, can you hear me? Good. My name is David Barch. I'm a landscape architect down in Mason, and I am looking at the Dam Park area. And there's this little plot of land which we all know about in the upper Lamprey River, the freshwater part, that is, as was mentioned, is used by the Fish and Game folks with the fish ladder. And I've taken a look at this opportunity that is kind of at the edge of downtown and how it might connect with the rest of the river and how it might connect with the dam and what opportunities there are for connection with perhaps the library and the rest of Main Street. And when first given this task, I thought it made sense to really look at what it could be in relation to other parts of downtown. And it's a tiny plot of land, and how can it interact with everything else? And so I thought, instead of considering constraints in any design process, in this brainstorming phase, we think about not constraints, but what could the best possible situation be? And then we can try to figure out how to get there. And so I thought perhaps there's a chance to connect this little park as a nexus at the northern part of town with the rest of the river, with the bridge here, with the dam, and with the library. Perhaps this could be a place for art installations, maybe for some interpretive signage to tell people about the natural history of the area, the cultural history. There are a lot of opportunities for what could happen there. We could plant some trees as a decent place to sit down on a summer day in the shade. And I also thought about what sort of recreational activities could happen here. If we tried to connect a boardwalk, perhaps, that would go upriver. There's a path here that goes to a kayak launch, and perhaps that could become a walking loop. And then perhaps we could have a catwalk that goes across the top of the dam with sufficient guardrails and to allow people to have a different view down the river. This sketch here kind of illustrates these things, and access is, here's the little park here. Access is one of the concerns, and so if we have children coming over to the park, say after school, from the library, how are they going to get there safely? And it seemed to make sense to put a crosswalk here and have them come directly down. This is a pretty small slide, so it's hard to read, but this little illustration here is a flight of steps down from that crosswalk. And if, for accessibility, we have, say, anybody who's disabled could come down the roadway in a path here, and that's the little park there. And we have, perhaps there could be a boardwalk similar to the boardwalks that we showed in prior slides to connect and make a loop with the kayak launch. I don't know exactly where that launch is, but I understand it's somewhere along the river here. There could be a walking loop that way. And perhaps there could be this catwalk across the top of the dam that connects with this little park over here and create a loop this way. As it is, we have a series of with these options, a series of options for exercise, passive exercise, walking, hanging out in the park. And I think it's a great opportunity for improving the town. And as I understand it, there may be an opportunity for the town to actually improve this space and maintain it. We won't get into ownership issues now, but those are some of the ideas that we came up with for the dam park.
Well, hello. My name is Robbie Woodburn. I'm a landscape architect, and my office is just across the street.
Hi, I'm C.R. Willicke. I think I have Jeff beat. I've been an engineer for 32 years, and with the DOT, I'm a civil engineer with the DOT for 26 years.
And I'm not going to admit how long I've been doing landscape architecture. One of the things we heard was about parking and about safety. So we all know this intersection of South Main Street when you're coming to town from the west, and you want to get onto the Main Street, what that intersection is like. So this particular section of the design addresses that. You can see. So that's South Main Street. Then this is 108, and then the corner that we're talking about. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's the corner. That's the hard corner. I work right around the corner here, and when I go home to Dover, I take that intersection very often, and I feel like I'm taking my life in my hands, and I think all of you are as well. So the idea was to look at options for that. We had several opportunities, things that we wanted to look at, and one was obviously to provide greater safety, enhance the pedestrian experience, because we always have the opportunity to do that when we're doing roadway changes. Provide more parking for the businesses along there, because you know how hard it is to go stop at any of those places because there's no place to park. Have better utilization of the spaces we have to maybe create some pocket parks, and trying to activate the space by bringing people from Main Street proper up into and near those businesses. So this particular plan changes South Main Street to a one-way going west. That means if you're coming from the east and you wanted to go, if you're coming from the west and you wanted to go south, you would take a right on Jerry Avenue and go down, and we'll be showing you improvements to Jerry Avenue that will make it easy to go back up if you wanted to. When you go to one way, if you start your design at the edge of the existing northern sidewalk, imagine these dimensions. First you do 5-foot shoulder that allows for a bike path. Then you do a 12-foot drive lane. Then you do an 8-foot parallel park. That leaves you with up between 9 and 10 feet at the face of those businesses, which is completely different than what's there now. You go back. Sorry. So you can see it. You can see that on the plan how the sidewalk on the south is much bigger. We've provided parallel parking along that way. We've also looked to steal space. So there's lots of roadway space that even when you do a standard roadway with 24 feet or 2 12-foot lanes and parking, there's lots of leftover space that we're not using in Newmarket, and we need to grab that for pedestrians to make this walking through town more enjoyable and handsome and usable and exciting. So by doing that, by grabbing space, right there we grabbed a little bit of space next to the corner of that building by adding a retaining wall, getting the existing retaining wall higher and making that area flat so you could do a little pocket park there, meaning a couple of benches, maybe a tree. In front of the VFW, there's a ton of space that's in the road that we don't use. There's two parking spaces there. There are parking spaces there now. We just moved the sidewalk out so that the edge of the travel lane and the parallel parking spaces are next to one another. And now you've got a wider sidewalk. At the corners, we've done bump outs as we've done through town. That gets us a little bit more room, gets our edges of our crosswalk closer to one another, so we're not taking our lives in our hands when we're going across those lanes. It allows for additional trees. It allows for additional lighting. And so you can see all the way up to Tasker Lane, people now have a sidewalk, as opposed to walking on the face of the building on the asphalt and people parking cars up against the storefront. On the north side, there's a couple of opportunities. One of which is the engine house is this historic little gem that sort of sits there with its doors closed and has a fire truck inside. So there is an opportunity to potentially use that as a public building that might be an event space. So maybe the truck moves out of there and you can have an art exhibit, or you can have a band play in there, or you can, utilize the gems that you have, and that's one of them. I walk by it a lot when I go to lunch, and it's like, I wish I could see what's inside of that. I wish that could be used. So there's an opportunity. Next to that, just to the north of it, there's I want to say it's an informal parking area, but people, I believe, lease those spaces. There's an opportunity to maybe find parking elsewhere and use that as space that's adjacent to, right, we put parking along the side of what's the name of that road? South Street, right. South Street is also way wide for the kind of street that it is. So if you make it 24 feet wide, guess what? There's room to have a little bit of green space on the one side and to put parallel parking on the other side. So there's some opportunities to make things finer by tweaking things. Whether that sort of pocket park will work there, who knows? But it's an opportunity to make that potential event space more meaningful. And then, thank you. This is my assistant. So one of the things that we have to be cognizant is that we have people coming in from the west, and we know how some people, myself included, drive a little too fast on that road. People need to know as they're approaching this that, it's going to change to one way. Where am I going to go? And so the alignment of the roadway shows you how to turn there. We bump that thing out a little bit so that you would turn up South Street and either turn around or go around a loop or whatever. There will, of course, would be signage at Jerry Ave saying, traffic this way, local traffic only, but you know how that happens. So that's how that would be solved.
Just that, yeah, 152 eastbound would be signed to go down Jerry Avenue. And so, yeah, like she said, there'll be signing as well as sort of physical features to keep you from going the wrong way.
So, go back. So that's that typical. No, to the section, the next one. That's boiling it down to sort of this is how it typically goes. That's the minimal section. The 6-foot sidewalk on one side, or the existing sidewalk on one side, a 5-foot shoulder for bikes, a 12-foot lane, an 8-foot parking area, and then a widened sidewalk. Okay. So this is a very quick and very sketchy 3-dimensional view as you're coming around the corner by Johnny Boston's of what that might look like. So the sidewalk on the right-hand side is the existing sidewalk. There's a crosswalk that goes across. This is that little pocket park bump out. We might use a few trees, but the sidewalk, so the parallel parking, and then there's actually a 10-foot sidewalk between that car and those buildings. Yeah, it's different. Next. So the other thing, when you make the improvements to South Main Street, of course, we need to think about the traffic coming down Jerry Avenue and going to 108 and making left and right-hand turns. So this had been studied by PHB, previously, and they they made some suggestions, so we drew it and put some landscaping on it so you could kind of understand what those suggestions might be. So in order to facilitate the traffic there and not necessarily put a signal there, we would need 3 lanes instead of 2, right? You'd have the, actually, good traffic.
Yeah, we don't know at this point with, very limited study whether or not a traffic signal is warranted. You have to go through 7 or 8 different warrants and calculate that, and it's still somewhat of a judgment call. So, but you would, Exeter Road, you guys know, going north, the gas station. So come down Jerry Avenue, coming south, you'd still be able to go right, but then we would create sort of 2 lanes coming south, so that you could have people who want to go south not waiting behind somebody who wanted to turn left, who can't go on Main Street anymore because it's one way the other way. So they're going to come down Jerry and then make this left. And that we did hear that, up at the corner here, it is really hard, and we can see it too. It's hard to make a left there and handle the grade of the road and everything. So, this would be widened out and sort of curved a little more so you can make that left turn. If you're on 108, you could still turn left into Jerry Ave, or if you're coming down the hill, going southbound on Exeter Road, then you could turn. So all the movements are still there. This potentially could be signalized, and if it was, it would likely be coordinated with the railroad crossing, which is about 600 feet down the road, so that if the railroad crossing was red, then this signal would turn red and keep the cars from hitting the railroad tracks. So.
Two other things that we're showing here is currently the trees along the side of Jerry Avenue on the right-hand side there. Yeah, that's that side. Those are all ashes. They're all in decline. They're almost dead. They scare me as I drive under them, to be quite honest with you. In this change, they most likely would be taken down, and then we would replace them with something new and less disease-prone. The other thing is that we think, on the other side, we think that there is a potential to extend the sidewalk up the street, back up to South Main. There's parking along the side, and we want to keep that parking, but there looks like there's a lot of room. We didn't get that far, but we really feel like that should be thought of. So I think that's...
Yeah, and the sidewalk on Jerry's is not the best, so, looking to improve that if that's desired, to make that. And then if not, you could put a crosswalk in there, and there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street.
Who am I passing this off to? Oh, I'm still talking. Sorry. So this is the third task that I had 20 minutes left to draw it, and I started to draw it and could not get a design that was as, not refined is not the word, finished or good to look at yet. But we're always looking, one of the things we heard yesterday is we really want to have places for people to interact, connect, to activate the town, even more than it already is. This particular space between the Memorial and the Willie House, I drive by it every day and I think, us designers are always kind of like, well, what can we do now? But I always look at that space and think there's a potential. Now, of course, I don't know if you guys know this, but it's all private property in there. So it's an opportunity that would need some work to make happen if people were excited about this. If not, they might not be. But one of the things that drove my thinking about this is the pavers that are there. They're really nice. They make a nice rumbly sound, but they're gray, so they look like asphalt. So they don't announce that it's a crosswalk. So, of course, if I'm mine, I would replace those with a paver of a contrasting color. Maybe they're bricks, and yes, you can drive over bricks. Maybe they're cobbles or something that is not dark gray that looks like the asphalt. Number one. Number two, that is right in the middle of town, directly across from the memorial. It screams for like town green, or in this case, a public plaza. Now, plaza, it makes me sound like makes me think of Rockefeller Plaza. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a central, hardscaped space in which that becomes a stage for public interaction. So imagine the Willie House being the anchor of that. They have their plantings and their walkway in front of it. And between the front walkway of the Willie House and the street, you create a piazza, let's say, paving that describes where the traffic should. You know, when you're in Italy or in Europe, and there's these public spaces, and there's people in them, and there's traffic in them, and the traffic is controlled by either the pavers that are there, or bollards, or where the trees are, and you can have cars and people interact and still use the space, and the space becomes a stage. At one time of day, it might be tents for a farmer's market. On another weekend, it might be an art show. It's a place for things to happen. It could be closed off, just like South Main Street could also be, now because it's one way, be closed off, and you could have street fairs, or you could have a Newmarket. Well, during Newmarket days, you could close off the South Main Street. You could close off this and have spaces in which things can happen. Are these big sort of pie in the sky ideas? Yes, indeed they are, but that's what we do. Okay, so imagine that there's, on each side of this, there's these paved ways in some sort of a paver that is different from what the central square is. Imagine that there's one big tree or one fantastic sculpture, something fun. And then there's space in between those access ways and what that thing is in the middle for things to happen. Concerts, farmers markets, art shows, whatever. This, to me, is a screaming opportunity. I'm really sad that I didn't get to do a sketch for you guys, but I'm going to pass it on to Lisa.
Can you back up a slide for a second? So I just want to point out here that we have this lovely new mural installation here. This is fun, by the way. The Arts Council was privileged enough to help fund this project, and so it was really exciting to be able to see it in person. But you have space over here for another mural. So you could really frame this space here with artwork. Okay, go ahead. So anyway, as Robbie was saying, how do we activate a plaza that's in the space? So we were envisioning it as a sort of a pop-up space where events could just, it would be a little bit maybe more experimental, where you could try different things. It could be there could be low investment opportunities, see what works, see what captures community interest, community attendance. But as Robbie mentioned, you could set up an art market here. This is the Art on the Green at Lake Sunapee. Farmers markets with some music. This is from Lebanon. This is, you could do children and family art making opportunities. This is from Newport Library Arts Center, working with the farmers market. You could do flower markets. So there are all kinds of activities that you could host in a small space to really activate and engage people right there in the center of town and give it a sort of a town center feeling. So next. And then going back to the engine house here and the mention of being able to repurpose that for their activities. So imagine this. Imagine a warm summer evening. Imagine throwing open those doors, setting a band up inside of the firehouse, closing off this section of South Main Street and hosting live music in the street, like a sort of block party. Or, while also hosting live music if you like, this is from Nashua. This is their farmers' dinners, setting up a long table down the middle of that closed street and hosting a community dinner that might be in partnership with some of the local farmers or restaurants. So there are a lot of great things that could happen there. I think that, so I'm looking at your master plan where vibrancy and connectivity are mentioned, and looking at the town's cultural plan. You are lucky enough to have a cultural plan. Most communities in New Hampshire don't. And looking at some of the priorities that have been identified there, what that actually does is it creates a continuous corridor for arts, creativity, and events, starting down here at the engine house and extending all the way up Main Street to the dam park. So there are spaces all along that can be activated. So if we are talking about hosting the Newmarket Music Festival, for instance, you know, you could have a site here, you could have activities going on in the pop-up park that's just down the road. You could have stuff going on at Shanda Park. You could have something going on at the Willie House. You could have something going up at the dam. So you can activate spaces all over town and have people moving up and down through the community, really enjoying all the assets the town has to offer. And then also, you know, I've also pulled a photo of these, the pop-up art gallery here. In all those pop-up parks, those small parks that Robbie was mentioning, it's an opportunity to expand that pop-up art gallery program and really, in a small footprint kind of way, highlight and feature the local artists that are an important part of the economy of the community.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve. I'm on the Planning Hampshire board, and I work on the architecture side of things.
Tom Morgan. I'm a community planning consultant based in Portsmouth. I'm also a part-time town official in Seabrook. And I'll be talking about electric vehicle chargers in a few minutes.
So we're going to give a brief overview of what we looked at, which is parking assets, everybody's favorite topic. So what we started to do is look at the existing public parking locations, and those are shown in blue here. You have a Railroad Street lot, a small lot down here, a Bay Road lot, which is that municipal lot up by the access way into Heron Point lot itself, the Beach Street expansion lot, which is down the street from here a little bit, and then we have a Shanda Park lot, which is near the boat launch. One of the things that we talked about during these sessions is the idea of sort of like sharing versus overcrowding. And what we see are some opportunities for some potential shared parking. And what that could potentially look like is evaluating sort of parking pass or sort of like patron parking locations, such as up by the Newmarket library, where you have different breweries and restaurants and such. There's also an opportunity to look at the post office, maybe perhaps off hours, which our understanding is that's already sort of happening, maybe informally. And then there's also some different lots here as well. There's a town hall auxiliary lot, as well as the new parking that we're talking about, which is that reconfiguration of that one way at the end of Main. So here's just one small sample of what a parking study starts to look like. This is an example on the right here is the lot next to the Newmarket Library. And all we did is take a snapshot of these various parking lots and look at their capacities in one part of one day. Now, our understanding is that there is a town-wide parking study currently going on. So this is what that starts to sort of look like is you're seeing the number of spaces and the utilizations. It varies based on time of day, based on what sort of events are going on, but this is a good snapshot of what that starts to look like. You can start to see how well utilized all your parking counts are. For reference, this is the outline of that in orange, and these blue spots here are the municipal lots, which are signed down by the entrance over here.
Yeah, so yesterday, one of the comments we heard from folks in attendance was that Newmarket's electric vehicle charging infrastructure is inadequate. Comment did not surprise me, and I'll tell you why. If you go to the next slide there, Steve. One of the things I do down in Seabrook is I do ad hoc interviews with people charging their cars. We have a lot of chargers, and I go up to them and I say, you know, what's your experience like? What are we doing right? What could we do better? Where are you from, and what prompted you to come here to Seabrook today? I remember a year ago, a fellow said, well, I've come from Newmarket. And I said, well, why did you drive all the way from Newmarket to charge your car? And he said, because Newmarket's problematic for if you own an electric vehicle. It's not really adequate to find a good place to charge. So I wasn't surprised that I heard the comment yesterday about EV chargers could be improved. First thing we did is we looked at what's actually out there. That's those little blue symbols. There's 4 level 2 chargers in Newmarket. One's at the library, one's at the Stone School, one's down at the Chandler Park, and then there's a 4th at Recfield. Now the level 2 is useful in certain situations, but it will take you many hours to charge your car. And if you live in Newmarket, if you're a renter, you're in an apartment building, that's what this fellow was. This didn't work for him. He had to charge much quicker than that. So what he does is he goes to Seabrook every weekend to charge his car. So one takeaway there is that this infrastructure draws business. He went to Seabrook and spent money there. Allergies. And that's I think would be beneficial for Newmarket as well, is to have more fast chargers in center town and draw business, and that's one benefit for that.
Thanks very much, Tom. Go back to the one more slide back. Yep, one more slide. Just to point out what Tom was getting at with increasing capacity level 2, those are sort of chargers where it might take a little longer to charge, and then these are these level 3s. So the existing ones are in green. You saw on that other plug share map, which is just an app you can use to find plugs, and then there's potential chargers where with level 3s, you might need a little bit more space for a transformer, for service, and things like that. But we identified these lots as seem to have decent capacity or for space in the area, and we also put in some other lots that are not or locations that are not specifically right in downtown, but seem to be local destinations for shopping and such. So, thanks. All right, and wayfinding. So, parking's one thing, and then trying to find it's another. So what we noticed in Newmarket is that you're sort of at a crossroads with signage. There are some improvements starting for pedestrian signage, and it's starting to help with this. But what we're noticing is that, for example, up at the Newmarket Library, there's a municipal signage lot here, but it's fairly small and tough to see, especially when you're driving south and the sun's, as you can see in your eyes, it's really, really challenging. And also, even if the sun's in your favor, some of the blue signage is fairly high up and the lettering is a little small and faded. So some challenges there as well. So what we see that's going well is that this is a newer sign type. It's more of a pedestrian scale, a little bit more challenging to see in a car because of the scale and the placement of lettering. But we see this as going in a great direction. It's starting to make it easier to find your way around. And then another example of somewhere close by that is doing this sort of blue on white theme, we think fairly well, is Rochester. So they have very good designations for parking, the typical P everybody sees, as well as, a larger sign with taller letters, so it's easier to spot from the car. And then they also have done a similar thing to you folks with a pedestrian scale, where they've sort of created this same type and just really brought that to more locations of the town in order to make wayfinding easier. The way we try to think about it is, think if you didn't have your phone or a GPS or a map, how would you know where to go? That's the question we try to look at. So.
Yeah, regarding the EV chargers, I think you have a great opportunity to make some progress there with the update to the master plan, because that will, one part of that will be public input. But where would it make sense to have more infrastructure like this? And of course, you have 2 different kinds. You got the level 2 and the fast chargers. And master plan would be a good first step to identify those locations where would serve the residents well.
Thank you.
All right, I'm bringing it home for you guys, so don't worry, we're almost done. My name is Jody Nazaka. I am the Economic Development Director for the City of Manchester, and I'm usually brought into these charrettes to wrap everything up, and it's usually kind of a depressed village area or a downtown, and you guys don't have that here, so you have a lot to be proud of here, not only as community members, but the work that's been already happening here in the town for the last 10 plus years. So not a whole lot to share with you other than congratulations and thank you for welcoming us into your beautiful town. But as Tom mentioned, a great place to continue a lot of these efforts that the town's already working on is supporting a lot of the efforts that are already underway.
We learned today from Bart that the master plan's kind of been piecemealed over the last 20 years or so, and there's plans to do a complete comprehensive overhaul of that. So that's a great way to bring a big community vision together, all cohesively, and to have that move into the next 10 years of the future for Newmarket. And chapters that typically touch on a lot of the economic development stuff are land use, existing and future, population, what are the trends, how can you plan for that, housing, community facilities, and adding in more discussions about activating the riverfront. Little fun fact, New Hampshire is actually is in the top 10 states across the country for outdoor recreation, and we bring in $3.2 billion annually in outdoor recreation through tourism. So it's a really great thing, especially this time of year. Not only New Hampshire residents, but out-of-state residents love flocking to communities like Newmarket. So it's great that you have a riverfront that you can activate to help enhance some of that local economic development. And we heard over the last 2 days a lot of perceived issues that have a lot of connections, and a lot of things are already underway to address those issues. As already mentioned, doing a downtown and townwide parking study so you can figure out what it is you already have and how to better utilize the assets that are already in place. Updating your subdivision site plan regulations to encourage more planned unit developments that allows for more neighborhood type developments. So imagine less cul-de-sacs, more neighborhood feels, more of a connected community, and also allowing for more preserved open space. Also updating the zoning regulations to be more form-based. So basing what you're allowing to be developed in your town based on what's existing. So adding in complementary types of uses and designs rather than making it a little bit more broad. That's kind of the direction that most communities are going. Manchester, we're moving to more form-based. It allows for better density, but more control. And also connecting more local and regional trails. That can also be done through some of the planned unit developments and allowing better opportunities for these little neighborhood pockets to connect with one another as well as the downtown. And I hear a lot about the downtown business scene. There's a lot of good things happening between the Arts and Tourism Commission, the Newmarket Business Association. So a lot of the recommendations that I would normally ask a community to start considering, Newmarket's already doing it. The one thing I would recommend, Bart mentioned there is a economic development committee. It hasn't met in maybe 10 years, so I would encourage getting that group energized again and maybe doing an economic development strategic plan to see how you want the downtown to develop over the next several years. Next slide, please. And some creative ways to help fund some of the stuff that we talked about today. And again, Newmarket is already taking a lot of these steps. One of them is creative strategies for long-term investments. I understand that your master plan, each year the town kind of squirrels away a little bit of money, so there's a money in place to do these types of planning development tools. And for example, the town can put away $10,000 every year into an economic development fund. And over 10 years, you're going to have, depending on how interest is, you could have over $100,000 to invest in pocket parks or art installations or strategic plans. So in the big picture of things, it's easy to kind of put away a little bit of money and then you can do a bigger project further down the line. More public-private partnerships. You have a great example of that here with the Chinburg development. It's a great way to enhance private property, but also have public improvements as well. And then tapping into the community development block grants throughout the state through the CDFA. Great example of this if anyone's been to Littleton, New Hampshire. They developed a beautiful brewery and public space along the river through CDFA funding. So lots of great opportunities. And again, you have a lot to be proud of here in Newmarket, and we are so appreciative that you welcomed us into your community and that we had a lot of local residents on our team. So it helped, other than Sarah, it helped bring a lot of great fact finding to the downtown. We got Sarah to find new things about her community she never knew. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tiffany.
Jody. All right, so that really concludes our presentation. Before we start Q&A, I just want to kind of double stamp on the fact that these are just recommendations. You know, we're not here to make decisions or to dictate anything to your community. So this is really something that when we have a final report, we'll hand over. And this is for Newmarket to take forward some of it, none of it, all of it. You know, you can really see what's a good fit for you all. And so a lot of communities find that this process really energizes folks, gets more people involved, gets some momentum behind some projects that have maybe been on the back burner, but maybe you've been thinking about for a while. And so we hope that's the case for you all as well. We're gonna open up for Q&A, so you can really ask as specific a question or as broad a question as you want. I'm gonna hand the mic to Brian, and if he can't answer the question, we're gonna hand it off to our team members.
Great, and just to reiterate, so we had 90 minutes to present a massive amount of information. We kind of went through everything very fast. We will hand over this PowerPoint presentation to the town this week, but also we'll provide the final report in the next couple months, and that'll have a lot of like these pictures, but with written narratives that actually kind of explain it in more detail, because 2 minutes on a slide doesn't really give you the whole vision. The quality of the graphics will be a lot better too, because we had to like take pictures of things, because we hand drew them, we were finishing everything up, so we'll scan them in much higher quality. So that report will really explain a lot more what we did. But like Tiffany said, happy to take some questions. We have about 15 minutes.
Why don't you let them go first? They've got a few. Just a really quick question. In passing, there was I think a very quick reference to the notion that the weir could come out for part of the year and presumably would only be in for the spring, fishing run. Did I understand that correctly?
We didn't really get into that. We know that there's maybe some communication that needs to happen with all the stakeholders with that. We heard varying, people love it, people don't like it, so we will kind of stay out of that a little bit, if that's okay. Thanks.
Our understanding is it gets pulled out for the winter. Already gets pulled out for the winter and gets stored in Shanda Park. So some of the sketches were just kind of acknowledging that, but maybe like slight relocation if Shanda Park was to be like expanded. So
the weir is actually a pretty unique feature, and for people who want to learn how things worked before, that's an excellent example. What I will say is, as a navigable waterway, this community has a long history with sailing. You're going to have at least 30 feet high water clearance on any bridge, so you can keep sailing in the community.
Great. Yeah. So the bridge at the narrow would have that clearance. The bridge further up, there's only like a 15-foot difference from Main Street down to the water level, so that would have to come up higher, but it's also further up. But yeah, there's a lot of coordination, and these are high-level, graphics. But the grades and the boardwalks would allow at least that 30 feet clear in that shallow area. It just gets a little bit bigger.
Hi, I attended one of the meetings yesterday, and a lot of this focuses on getting to the other side of the river. And a point that was made, which I thought was a good one, was it's a relatively short walk from the bridge that we've already got. It's less than a quarter of a mile, and the individual that brought it up talked about the Freedom Trail. Well, my sense of it was that was a great suggestion. I didn't see it on your list, but it's also a very attractive walk.
Yeah, we kind of went over it on the high-level plan. So when we write up our narratives, we will reflect a lot more of what we heard and some of those options and alternatives. So we acknowledge that, and there's a lot of different ideas. Bridge is very expensive. Some signage, some walking trails a lot cheaper. So.
Just a comment. The grant to the town of Heron Point is quite restrictive. So I don't think anybody needs to worry about anything being done to it, because the grant is very restrictive. There are no more buildings that can be built on it, and I can assure you that the neighbors would would want to make sure that stays that way.
Understood. Thank you for that.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. I thought it was a terrific job, and I'm very happy you came here. I took part in several of the meetings yesterday. I thought it was a great process, the way you took input, and I think you really have come up with some exciting ideas. My question is, going forward, is there a way, when we did the living shoreline, for example, there was a period of time after, everybody got together to kind of check back if we had questions or we wanted any further guidance. Do you kind of build that into the process as well?
So these volunteers will spend a little bit of time over the next week or so finalizing their recommendations and narratives. We'll hand over that report. We are available for clarifications and questions and stuff, but our work kind of ends at the next week. So that's when we hand over the report and work with the committees, work with BART, work with everybody in town to continue the vision, take the next steps. Like some of these things, they're pie in the sky, they're out there. But there's, oftentimes small things you can do to get the momentum going. And thank you for your compliments. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the turnout. We base our recommendations on what we hear from all of you. We didn't want to come in here and make our own recommendations. We really wanted to hear, and that's really the most powerful thing of this is just getting everybody in the same room, documenting what everyone wants. Like people have said before, there's been a lot of ideas, but they've been kind of stagnant over the years. So the town really needed a refresh on what everyone wants because they're actively working on building the master plan. So this will be a nice part of that, and this helps with the public engagement for any of the grants and anything else you apply for.
I'm so sorry I couldn't have been part of the process before this. It is amazing work. I love the creativity and how this all kind of comes together. Were the town officials involved to this point, or was this primarily the representatives of the organizations? Because two things, the Lamprey River is brackish. It's not salt water after the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Bryant Rock Park that's actually, I think there was somebody that said it needs clarification. We're in the middle of a lot of negotiation with a lot of projects right now, and that's a mandatory fire lane. It's not a park anymore.
Okay.
So some of those kinds of things, did the town work with you on a lot of?
So the town applied, and they gave us a tour yesterday.
Okay.
And then we had a meeting with all the stakeholders, and we got feedback from them. And then we had the public sessions yesterday. Today was just us. So if there's any mistakes, it wasn't checked by the town.
That's what I was just wondering, because when it's, of course, not expecting to be perfect, but if anybody ever said some of these things, I would be like, oh, they need to check that.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, so we started.
And the bridge.
Yeah.
The bridge is a big thing.
So I think there might have been a little misunderstanding of where the bridge was. So the bridge at Bryant Rock, we weren't proposing to do anything, but I believe the town has some plans for that. We're kind of staying out of that one too.
Yeah, and we're right in the middle with the meeting on Monday on
Yeah.
that, so
And a lot of times the recommendations at Charrette's now, fire lane might not be negotiable, right?
Right.
But we recognize that in order to make a lot of these things happen, regulations might have to be, then you kind of have to back out of it. Like, okay, what are our rules right now? What's keeping us from doing this? And are we ready to make those changes or not? And then that kind of modifies like where you're going.
Of course.
So we definitely recognize that.
Of course.
Yes.
And
Hold on 1 second, there's one question.
One of the other things that we really didn't touch on is there are a lot of public and private, land areas. One really good thing that came out of yesterday was some of the private landowners and some of the town people kind of started talking and trying to figure out what's legal, what's not. So we didn't have time to do any research, but what will be in our report is recommending that the town meets with some of these private landowners to confirm what easements exist, what doesn't exist, what negotiations can be had. So we had some examples of some potential improvements. These can kind of be used to work together between the town to figure out, all right, what do people have an appetite for? What do they want? How do they negotiate? That sort of stuff. So again, these are all recommendations. There's a lot of work left to do to execute, any of these really.
Do you give guidance on the traffic studies? I live up west of Main Street, 152, and come down, and if I'm going north, I'm thinking it might be helpful to have a traffic study there at Elm Street, where it intersects with 108, because a light might be helpful there too, if you're diverting traffic down Beach Street Extension and South Street. And somebody needs to take a really close look at that 90-degree turn at the end of South Street, and the fact that there's basically that granite cliff that goes up on the right side.
Yeah.
South Street.
I'd recommend
Not
reaching
very
out.
movable.
Yeah, I'd recommend reaching out to the town, DPW and BART about, concerns like that. And I know they're in kind of coordination, some of this stuff is things that they've been thinking about. So, keep in contact with your town officials and, with the community, all these, the boards, the committees and everything.
A lot of projects like that would require further study. This isn't a study per se, right? So, if it's something the town wants to pursue, maybe people decide, that's not really, Newmarket doesn't want to do that, but if you do, then you'll have to take those next steps. Like what are the preparatory steps to not just like shut it down tomorrow one way and just be like, that didn't work. And there's ways to do some of these things on like temporary, shorter term basis and things, and that's something you could talk about with your commissions and committees in town.
And these roads are DOT controlled, so coordination with DOT in one way or another needs to happen for any changes in those areas.
Any other questions? Did anyone else from the team want to chime in on anything that people asked?
Can I just say one thing really quickly?
Hi, I'm on the Arts Commission, and I was so pleased that you picked up on what we've already started, actually. So we started with Pocket Park and did the renovation there, moved down the street to Willie Park. We know that there's a plan for the Cheswell statue to be at Arbor Park, if that happens. And we're looking on down the street. Hopefully, we'll turn the corner to the Elm Street mural and finish up there. But the thought of having the little park by the fish ladder, what I hope all of this does, and now there you go. Elise, I really appreciate how you delineated even going further and starting at the fire station and looking at that as an arts corridor. And I hope all of you take that as inspiration and support these initiatives as we continue them down Main Street, because I think it could make Newmarket a real destination for people who come and see what we have, much like people who go to Keene and other locations that have done that. So thank you very much for including that so significantly.
Yeah, when we first came to meet with officials and they gave us, just like me and Tiffany and a few other members, the initial walk, we walked around and we were like, you guys are already doing everything. What can we even do? Because we've been in some other really small towns with really run down downtowns, and they don't have any wayfinding, they don't have any striping. You guys are already doing it right. So just the fact that you guys had us here to see what else, how much more you could do, we're so impressed. And everybody was so involved and so friendly, and all the meals and everything that they were provided. So we've all had a really good time, and I love these. This is, I think, the 5th or 6th charrette that I've led, and one of my favorite things is really getting to know the people, getting to know the town. So every time I hear Newmarket, I think of the charrette, and I think of, we went out for some appetizers and a drink last night, and I really kind of get to know the town and a lot better than just going there for a meal or something. So thank you all for having us. Keep an eye out for our report. Keep in touch with the town. Thank you. Oh, and I do want to publicly acknowledge our awesome volunteers. They volunteer their time, and it's 2 full days, and then they have another day or two's worth of work left, and everyone is just super fun. It's been awesome. So thank you all.
Yes.